Hi guys. So I hope Katie and Jaden got this all set up for you guys. So Victoria, make sure everyone's paying attention, and let's get started with this. So our quiz review, make sure you guys are correcting your answers and that you turn it in after. So you will be getting a grade on the fact that you completed it and then that you corrected it. So for the first one here, you're solving this equation, and first thing you would want to do is you would want to distribute, but since I need to write my steps, since it says write a valid reason for each step, that means the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this is the given because I'm starting with this. And then from there, hopefully the first thing you're thinking is I need to distribute. So for step 2, I'm distributing. So my reason is going to be the distributive property. And then when you actually distribute, you should get 2x plus 20 equals 4x minus 60. Make sure you remember to keep that negative sign. So then from here, this is where you start to have options as to what comes next, because all you need to do is get x on one side and the numbers on the other. So it's really up to you where you want to start. So I'm going to start with just subtracting this 2x from both sides. So since I'm subtracting for step 3, it's going to be the subtraction property of equality. Now yours might be different depending on what you did first. So if you brought the 60 over, you would be addition property of equality. So subtraction property of equality, and you can just put an equal sign for equality. So basically the only thing that's going to change with these properties is whatever the operation is. So if you multiplied, multiplication property of equality, divided, division property of equality, and so on. So then you actually go through and simplify this. So I get 20 equals 2x minus 60. And if you want to have the river going down, you can this whole time. That's just preference, up to you. And then from here, my next step is I need to get x by itself. So I'm going to bring this 60 over. So I'm going to add 60. So since I'm adding 60, that means I'm doing the addition property of equality. So then you go through and actually add it. So 80 equals 2x. And then the last step is to get x by itself, which means I'm going to have to divide everything by 2. So this is going to be the division property of equality because I'm dividing everything. So divide by 2, we get 40 equals x. So that's it for that one. Now the only reason why I had to write the steps is because it said write a valid reason. Otherwise, you just can go ahead and solve. So for the next one, it just says to solve. So this one we can just go ahead and solve. We don't have to write the steps. So whenever you see a problem like this, we always want to work in the innermost parentheses first, because remember, order of operations, we start with parentheses. So what I do is I check out these parentheses here, and I see if there's any like terms that I can combine. And in this case, there aren't, so I'm just going to start with distributing to get rid of these innermost parentheses. So I'm going to start distributing, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep these brackets. Those brackets are just representing another set of parentheses. I'm going to keep those as is and just focus on this one set of parentheses at a time. So keep the 2 out in front, distribute. 2 times 3 gives me 6. 2 times 5 gives me negative 10 x, so I did 2 times negative 5, and then plus 4, and then I'm going to close the brackets. I'm going to draw the river for this one just because the algebra is a little bit more complicated. And then I have 5, keep the bracket, 2 times 3 gives me 6, 2 times negative 3 is negative 6x, plus 2. Close the bracket. And like I said, you always look at these parentheses. So now these brackets are like my parentheses. If there's anything that can be simplified inside of those, you want to do that first before we distribute these numbers in front. So I'm going to basically combine like terms here. So I'm going to keep that 2 out in front, and I'm going to combine this 6 and this plus 4 as like terms. So 6 plus 4 gives me 10, and then just carry the minus 10x. And then over on this side, I'm going to keep the 5 out in front, and I'm going to combine like terms. So I have 6 plus 2, so it's going to be 8 minus 6x. And then from here, now I can actually start to distribute. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to distribute. So 2 times 10 is 20. 2 times negative 10 minus 20x equals 5 times 8 is 40. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30x. And now at this stage, you have options as to what you want to bring over. But remember, in the end, you got to have x on one side and a number on the other, and you have to be using those properties of equality. So for me, I'm going to bring this 30 over. I always like to try to make it so that I get positive numbers. So I'm going to bring this 30x over and start carrying down the other stuff. So I have 20, negative 20 plus 30 is going to be 10x equals 40. And again, we're just going to continue carrying down this river. And then next thing I'm going to do is bring the 20 over. So I have 10x equals 20. Divide everything by 10. You get x equals 2. So that's it for that one. Now keep in mind, this starting at this line right here, your steps could have looked a little bit different, but in the end you should have got x equals 2. So then let's look at the back of this worksheet. So now we start seeing some fractional equations. So remember the rules for fractional equations. You want to use the LCM, and thanks to Mike, we know that we can just type LCM into the Inspire, so that makes it a lot easier. And we can basically just type in the letters LCM, use parentheses, and type in 3 comma 2. So it would look like this in the calculator. 3 comma 2. No equals. It would just be LCM of 3 comma 2, and then it would tell you, okay, that equals 6. So when we have fractions, the two differences here, for example 3, the fractions are out in front of the parentheses, so that means I only multiply the numbers out in front because the numbers out in front haven't been distributed yet. Where if you look at example 4, we're going to multiply each part by 6 because we don't have any parentheses, so there's no numbers that haven't been distributed yet. So for example 3, the LCM, I look at 3 and 2, the LCM of 3 and 2 is 6. So I'm going to multiply everything by 6. And when I say everything, I really mean just the numbers in front of the parentheses because those fractions haven't been distributed yet. So I can't multiply each part because I'll distribute after. Now, don't write this, but if there were like a plus 5 at the end, I would be multiplying that by a 6 as well because it's outside of the parentheses. So anytime you have parentheses, it's just the numbers in front get multiplied and then whatever else you have get multiplied. So then for this case, what I'm going to do is you can do 6 times 1/3 in your calculator, or think of it as 6 divided by 3. So if you do 6 divided by 3, you get 2. So it's going to be a 2, and then you keep the parentheses. And then over on this other side, 6 times 1/2 in your calculator is fine, or 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then 8 minus 4x stays. And now we just have a regular equation, so we go ahead and we distribute. So we get 42 minus 6x equals 24 minus 12x. And then this is where, again, you have the option. What do you want to move over? I'm going to move the 12x over, so I try to get positive numbers. Not that it matters. So I have 42, and when you do negative 6 plus 12, you're going to get positive 6x equals 24. Subtract the 42 from both sides. So we get 6x equals negative 18. Divide everything by 6. We get x equals negative 3. So then the next one, though, remember there's no parentheses, so that means the LCM of this is still 6 because it's 3 and 2 for the denominators. So I'm going to still multiply everything by 6, but this time each part gets multiplied since there's no parentheses. So 6 times 2 is 12. 6 times 1/3 is what you're really doing. So it's like saying 6 divided by 3. So it's going to be plus 2x. And then equals 6 divided by 2 is 3. So 3 times x is 3x. And then negative 4 times 6 is negative 24. Now keep in mind here what I really did. We have whole numbers because we have the big 2 and the 4. Those are just getting multiplied, where the fractions, it's really like dividing. So just that's how I know, am I dividing or am I multiplying the numbers? If it's a big number, it's a whole number. This is like saying over 1. So that means I'm multiplying, where the fractions you actually divide. But you can always put it in your calculator too. And then from here, you can just go ahead and solve it. So I'm going to bring the 2x over. So those cancel. I have 12 equals x minus 24. Add 24 to both sides. So we get 36 equals x. And that's it for that one. Number 5, it says to verify that this is a solution. So if you're verifying that this is a solution, what you need to do is you need to plug it in for every x value. So you're plugging it in for every single x in this equation. And when we plug in, we need to make sure we use parentheses. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2, and then I'm going to plug in the negative 2 for x using parentheses, and I keep everything else exactly the same. So plus 2 times negative 2 squared minus 12, and I'm trying to see if this actually equals negative 20. So I'm seeing that if I plug in x equals negative 2, am I getting the same thing on the left as I am on the right? So I put the question mark up there because I'm trying to see if they're equal. So now what I have to focus on is simplifying this. So I don't really touch this negative 20. I just try to simplify this side and see if it equals negative 20. So what you want to do is you want to simplify one part at a time. So what you want to do is you want to put this into your calculator, this first part. So 2 parentheses negative 2 to the third. In your calculator, you want to make sure that you enter it just like this. But to get that third power, you're going to hit the caret key and then 3, because that means you're raising to the third power. But you've got to have those parentheses exactly how you see them. So it should look just like this in your calculator. And when you do that, you should get negative 16. Because what's really happening is you're doing negative 2 to the third, which is negative 8. Negative 8 times 2 is negative 16. And then for the next one, you got to make sure you enter it again, just as you see it in your calculator. So you could do caret 2, or you could hit the squared button. There's an x squared key. You could just press that, and that'll raise it to the second power without having to use the caret. So then you have 2 to the 2 times negative 2 raised to the second is really like saying 4 times 2, so you're going to get 8, and then minus 12. And again, we're trying to see, does this equal negative 20? So if I simplify this, negative 16 plus 8 is going to give me negative 8 minus 12. Trying to see, does it equal negative 20? Negative 8 minus 12 is going to equal negative 20. Negative 20 does equal negative 20, so yes, this is a solution. X equals negative 2, and I just checked it. It worked out. So that's verifying that it really is a solution. So then the last part here says write an equation that is equivalent. So this is like what we did yesterday. And if you want to come up with an equation that's equivalent, remember what you have to do is you have to apply one of the properties to it. So for example, I could take and I could switch the 10x plus 5 because I just applied the commutative property of addition to it. That would work. I think it's easier just to add a number to both sides or multiply a number to both sides. That's probably the most common way to make an equivalent equation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick to multiply everything by 2. Multiply everything by 2. That's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do 2 times 3x minus 2 equals 2 times 10x plus 5. So I'm going to distribute 2 because I'm choosing to multiply everything by 2. So go ahead and distribute it. So we get 6x minus 4 equals 20x plus 10. So this equation is equivalent to this equation here because the only difference is I multiplied everything by 2. Now you could have left it like this with the parentheses. So basically what I did before to go from the first equation here to the second one, I did multiply everything by 2, but then to get to this third equation, really what I did was I actually used the distributive property as well as the multiplication property of equality. So as long as I'm using these properties, I'm creating equivalent equations. So you guys have the option to pick whatever you wanted. I could have said, let's add 5 to both sides. That would have given me an equivalent equation as well. So as long as you're using one of the properties, you really can't go wrong, and it should be an easy question for you. All right, so good luck today on your quiz, and have a great weekend, guys.